Buried 1,000 feet beneath the soil of southern Poland, a sprawling subterranean complex has been operating for centuries. It's known as the Bochnia Salt Mine, and it's one of the oldest of its type in Europe. Though these days it feels less like an industrial site and more like an underground amusement park, featuring oddities such as a regulation-sized basketball court, underground boating, and one of the longest slides ever constructed inside of a mine. Not to mention the underground train network, which I might add is also the only active train line in the world to pass directly through a consecrated Catholic church. However, as spectacular as these tourist-friendly areas are, I've always been curious about what's been left behind throughout its lesser-known, collapsing corridors. For context, miners have been digging here for nearly 1,000 years, and yet only 2.5 of its estimated 37 miles of tunnels are open to guided tours, meaning the rest of it remains as a forgotten underground labyrinth, untouched for generations. And I'm honored to inform you that that all changes today, as with the help of a geologist and guide to ensure my safety, I've been granted unprecedented access to visit parts of this UNESCO World Heritage site that are strictly off limits to the outside world. And I'm going to share every moment of this adventure with you. So stay tuned as we venture into the forbidden corridors of the Bochnia Salt Mine. I'm your host, Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History. This story begins in a time when salt paved the way for food preservation, making it a resource so coveted that the powers of the time considered it white gold.
If we are talking about really like 500 years ago, the king would be in charge of everything. He would be the owner of this place. Then you would have the administrators, mostly noblemen. Then there would be investors responsible for sinking new shafts. And then miners, the free people. There were no slaves or prisoners ever used in salt mines in Poland. And the people here held a very high status. There were free people employed by the king directly. That means they were well paid, a lot of privileges. This used to be a permanent position, and one of the privileges allowed them to pass it down to another generation.
These guys risked their entire fortunes to establish mining operations, and they did so in exchange for a percentage of the royalties from any discoveries. Although it may sound improbable for the 13th century, the solution made pragmatic sense. The king risked little, and the real burdens were effectively outsourced. Thus, the first shafts were driven in making what has since become one of Europe's largest and oldest salt mines. As the adventure began, we descended the oldest shaft, opting for the stairs to gain a better understanding of just how deep this mine really is.
So, as we descend this historic salt mine, 70 meters of stairs, we've got a bit of a bittersweet announcement. This is going to be one of my final episodes for On Location. So if you like the content, thank you guys for watching. It's been a great adventure with you. And if you'd like to see more content like this, I've also got good news, because I'm starting a new channel called What's Inside the Castle. It'll be fully dedicated to my European adventures. I hope you like the new channel, and I know that you're going to like the Bochnia Salt Mine. So this is the oldest shaft.
They started sinking the shaft in the 1248, and so in the 13th century. 70 meters is where the salt deposit really begins, and it goes much deeper. Can reach 540 meters in this area.
In fact, when we decided to descend the mine via 229 feet worth of stairs, I could really appreciate the scale.
So I don't know if it's because I'm trying to record right now, but I'm actually getting a little bit dizzy walking in circles.
Safety first.
The earliest miners used ladders.
Ladders.
This kind of would have been their daily descent. Would they just do it once a day, or would they actually go up and down?
No, once a day was enough.
No.
They would spend more than 8 hours underground in the subterranean part of the mine, because they would have to get to the working place, then work 8 hours roughly, and then they would get back to the surface. The limitations were ventilation and the source of light. Because if we are talking really about the old times, like 13th, 14th century, miners would be using, but not even lamps, they were clay pots. And the fuel for the lamps was the tallow, animal fat. And that would last roughly for 9-10 hours. So they would have to get in and out on the same day. This is the continuation.
Oh my. So it just keeps going down forever. That's how that looks.
289 meters.
Wow.
That's how deep this shaft is.
I thought, if it takes this long to walk down these stairs, it's no wonder it took nearly a millennium to dig all of this.
So that's the shaft station on the first level. So meanwhile, Michał is going to take us to a special place. You'll see something unusual, but as I told you, we are very close to the market square, yeah, because the town started growing on top of the mine. And for a moment, we are going to go west. We are going to pass through under the market square, really. This is where the oldest shafts were located, all of them. The first rails were placed here in 1861, although they would be much narrower. Originally, there would be just small wagons which would be pushed by the miners. Then in the 1870, 90 days, the horses would start pulling carriages here, so the gauge would get much wider, 80 centimeters, so 800 millimeters. And then after the Second World War, this is the gauge we are using now, 600 millimeters, which is much easier to walk for the miners. And you don't need so much space for the horses, which we don't use anymore. And we are going to the shaft station on the first level of the Regis shaft. It doesn't exist anymore. It was filled in 1967. It was not needed anymore because less and less salt was extracted here. This is the end of the corridor. This is the end of the passage. In the 1960s, you would reach another shaft here, which you could use to get back to the surface.
As the centuries progressed, exponential growth was enjoyed thanks to literal horsepower and brilliant engineering.
This area where we are now, which also was created in the middle of a chamber from the 17th century, this passage, that was constructed for our horses. Up to 16 horses would work in the subterranean part of the mine, and they would be using corridors like this, which are not very steep, for the horses to move from one place to another. In front of you, you're going to see that the corridor is going to get wider, but very characteristical shape, just a little bit further. Oh, right here. You can see on the right and on the left-hand side. Yeah. So this is a passing by place for the horses, because they cannot walk backwards. Okay. So if they met here in this place where we are, they would have space for the bellies. So they could just pass by and they would continue. It's very important for them not to get injured, because as we mentioned earlier, this is a aseptical environment. So if you get cut or if you're injured here, this is not going to get healed. You have to get back to the surface. Okay. It was very difficult to lower a horse down the mine.
The horses, once they were lowered down here, they'd kind of spend the rest of their natural life here.
Yeah, because it was difficult to lower a horse into a mine. You would have only two options. The first option is just a wooden crate. Mm-hmm. So you would place the horse in it, and the crate would be shut from all sides. Then it would be attached to a single rope, and that's how you would lower the crate down the shaft to the first level of the mine. And obviously the horse, which would be inside, wouldn't know what's happening, which means he could start panicking, kicking, and could even break its legs. That's why the miners would prefer to use the other option, which is much more complicated, a harness, a net made of hemp ropes, and the horse would be placed in it, but it would be suspended. It would have no control, and they would be lowered slowly to the first level, which means it's a time-consuming exercise. Then you need to calm down the poor thing, and then the horse would have to work in the mine, maybe even 8 hours, and that's why it wouldn't make sense to do it on a daily basis. This is why they stayed here permanently.
Anyhow, the engineering used to capture the horsepower was ingenious. Several horses would turn a massive wooden carousel to lift heavy blocks of salt to the surface. At the same time, individual horses pulled similar loads on a primitive rail system. This was revolutionary technology. Before this, miners had to dig these chambers with nothing more than a pick, a shovel, and a hammer.
Here you are. And we are going to reach some chambers which are from the 17th century.
From the 17th century. This is an example of the type of passage where the tourists would never go.
No, that's correct.
So thank you for sharing. So as you can see, there's normally a barrier.
Yeah.
But we're with a professional miner to keep us safe.
So now when you look at this, this is the entrance point.
This is like one of those experiences. It's terrifying and mesmerizing at the same time. We don't normally get this intimate with the earth. That's a good thing I've been keeping a diet.
That's helpful, that's for sure.
We carefully crossed these hazardous collapses with good reason, as beyond them were traces of bygone eras, both untouched and unseen for centuries.
So the crosscut is from the 19th century. You can see a signature of the miner here on the right hand side.
Oh, fascinating. So is this pretty common?
Yeah, in many places, but it keeps disappearing. With the humidity, salt is getting dissolved, and that's what happens.
Yeah, it's really revealing that this is probably how the majority of this place would be, and it's just slowly falling apart. So how many miles of tunnel?
There's probably around 25 kilometers left, so 16, 17 miles. If you look at the wall, there are anhydrides and gypsum, things like this. And obviously more signatures here. Jan, you can see clearly.
That's right.
And just behind you, there is another one. 18, maybe 70 something.
And you know, those signatures, they look as if they could have been written here yesterday. Mm-hmm. They're so undisturbed.
So this is one of the chambers, even if it doesn't look like, but you can see there is a wall on your right, on the right hand side, built of blocks of salt. So when they extracted salt here, they left an empty space, and to prevent it from collapsing, they would just support it with waste rock, lower quality salt, leaving only passages like this one, so you could get access to other places in the mine. If you look at the wall on the left hand side here, you can see the traces of pickaxes. They're quite worn out, but here, all these stripes here, that's the pickaxes. So that's how this salt would be extracted here. The earliest works were carried out in this place in 1657.
As we descended further, a few surprising things happened that the camera doesn't fully convey. First, the air temperature rose surprisingly fast. Then, the air became stuffy. And finally, the passage became extremely steep. But the challenges were worth it, as we came upon an amazing discovery.
Yeah, the signatures are just everywhere, and they really appear as if they were put here yesterday. You know, I mean, since that signature was written, how many people would you estimate, if you had to guess, have been here?
Oh, not many, to be honest, because there was no reason to come here. Geologists would come here, but occasionally, only a few people, I can't say.
Powiedziałem, że od 90 roku to można tak z 10 osób maksymalnie.
Oh,
tutaj.
10 osób.
So, 10 people. 10 people
that's
since
amazing.
1990s.
Man, this is tight.
At this point, I didn't imagine that the experience could become any more intense, and yet, we were about to go even deeper.
Oh, wow, yeah, it goes down. And it looks like there's some woodwork down there, too. You see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This must be rarely visited,
Ja nie byłem
I
tutaj.
suspect.
No, he says he's never been here before.
Even the technician's not been here. It's incredible.
To są włosy świętej Kingi.
Wow. Ale ładne.
Look at the ceiling. You see these black spots?
Yeah.
You know what's that, yeah? So that will be the oil lamps, leaving the marks on the ceiling.
Do you have any estimation as to when this chamber was excavated?
Here between 1657 and 18th century. So,
By the 17th century, regional wars, most notably the Swedish Deluge, consumed the land above, leading to a slump in production as would-be miners were sent off to the front lines. But when the dust finally settled in the 18th century, the world looked very different. Poland had been wiped off the map, and Bochnia had become an asset of the Habsburg Empire. tucked away in the Austro-Hungarian region of Galicia. Given the continued importance of salt, the new leadership introduced sweeping reforms to modernize both the economy and industrial practices. Steam engines replaced horses, and lower levels were rapidly added, in what their government described as a, quote, dramatic sense of efficiency. But this area of industrial prosperity was eventually lost due to the global conflicts of World War I. As the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, Bochnia was returned to a newly independent Poland. From that point, it continued operation as a vital national asset. Production peaked by World War II, only to slow to a near standstill in the decades that followed. By 1968, production was so slow that authorities began using experimental extraction methods. In particular, a technique called leaching was used to extract salt and then dilute it in water. We actually traveled down to one of those leaching chambers and visited a workspace that no one has seen in nearly 60 years.
So where does this take us?
It takes us to one of the chambers where it was an experiment. They were using fresh water to obtain more salt. That means that the salt deposit is almost gone. So the miners came up with a new idea. Why not to spray fresh water on the walls, and then you can dissolve the salt, get the brine, which is free from impurities, and then you can evaporate it on the surface.
Although this area is not considered historic in the grand scheme of things, it does contain some of the most amazing untouched artifacts that we came upon. Items just collecting dust for decades.
And this is a Polish military jacket, actually the coat. If you look closely, you can see even eagles on the
buttons.
Yeah.
It looks like they had a workshop here.
Yes.
So in the 60s, they were doing some experimental mining to see if they could extract salt using hydraulics. And no one has been here since. So this was the workshop. There's a brush, a piece of bread, and some notes. I mean, can it really last for like 50 years like that?
Yeah, why not? If it's dry and there are no mice, why not? This is a plum of something.
And what is this?
This is probably the system of the water which we have here, because it's komora. Number 4 means chamber. 3 means chodnik. Number 2, that means otwór, which means a hole.
Okay.
So probably the shaft which we saw.
It's wild. And then this is a mystery to me. It looks as if it would be a toilet or something, but I don't know.
Yeah.
My
oh
imagination.
yeah. I think you guessed right. Because there's so many newspapers, and this is definitely shit. The white thing.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it is.
Yeah.
It's completely untouched.
Yeah.
And it's someone's desk and toilet.
Yeah.
It
They
seems
just left it and
Just left here and...
it's still here.
yeah.
Tak, wchodzimy. Wychodzimy.
All right.
Ultimately, these ideas proved too little, too late. By 1990, extraction was terminated altogether. Even so, this is not where the story ends. In the 750 years it took to create, 37 miles ultimately twisted across 16 levels. And in that process, a shared cultural heritage emerged. And I'd argue that it was shared values that turned out to be the mine's saving grace. And this actually goes back to the mine's roots. You see, as literacy was uncommon, religious imagery was often used as a universal underground language. For example, refuge points were named after saints, and later altars were set up to emphasize the importance of those landmarks. Remember, in an environment where you could be killed in all manner of the imagination, this solution resonated strongly with the men, who indeed came to see the points as sacred.
Anything could happen here. Water could enter. Things could collapse. Cave-ins could happen. You could get lost, which was very easy in the old times, and that's why they needed protection. Chapels would be constructed in many places Like this example here, the crucifixion chapel. Miners would be stopping by those chapels on the way to their working places, on the way back, to pray for protection and to show the gratitude for saving their lives. There were two other reasons why chapels were constructed in the mine, because there was almost 30 chapels, no more than 30 chapels, of which only 8 are remaining today. The other thing, there were emergency points. In every chapel, you would have open fire, which you could use for your lamps in case draft would just, get rid of your light. There would be fuel for your lamps kept here, which was the tallow, the animal fat, and fresh water, which would be changed systematically, because if you leave fresh water here, within 24 hours roughly, it's going to start changing the taste, because there's so much salt in the air.
The greatest culmination of this idea is located at a depth of about 577 feet. St. Kinga's Chapel, the most prominent and best preserved underground place of worship in the mine. The most striking feature of this chapel is the underground railway track that runs directly through the center. While this might seem like a modern tourist gimmick, its presence is anything but. It's the direct result of 19th century industrial pragmatism. During the Habsburg era, as the mine underwent rapid modernization, efficiency took precedent over architectural preservations. So, as the chapel already existed, engineers determined that the most direct route to transport salt from the deeper levels to the shafts required a corridor to be cut straight through the chapel's nave. And so track was laid across the floor. Anyhow, considering the utility miners found in these religious underground shrines, other customs evolved, such as the practice of saying, "May God grant luck" to any passing miner. In turn, camaraderie and a special attachment to this otherwise dangerous workplace formed. For many, the mine became a place where the sacred met the industrial. This sentiment showed when the operations were in their final years. The miners were asked to backfill some of the historic places. In short, they didn't always cooperate. Anecdotal reports suggest that workers would fight for preservation in rather creative ways. For example, if they were ordered to backfill a chamber, they complied. Still, they did so by removing backfill recently placed into another historic area, which satisfied the bureaucratic request and saved monuments. Fortunately, most people upstairs, including the government, also came to recognize the cultural value of the space. By the 1990s, they came up with a provocative idea. Bochnia would become a tourist destination unlike anything the world had ever seen. The first years were slow, with fewer than 2,000 visitors, although the tourists who came reported having an authentic experience that really couldn't be replicated elsewhere. They entered the mine in fully protective gear and ventured into treacherous spaces, much like my own experience here.
You know, I haven't even imagined a place like this.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Like, I've seen some unusual things, but this is...
And so it wouldn't take long for the mine's reputation to grow as one of the world's most interesting and intense underground experiences. And some of the activities down there are truly unusual. For instance, at 754 feet below the surface, there's a massive flooded corridor known as Chamber 81, where a boat crossing carries visitors through a dark, narrow passage on top of that dense, saturated brine. The water here is special for its 32% salinity, a concentration so high that it matches the Dead Sea, making it physically impossible for a person to sink, leading us to a rather bizarre legal fact. This brine is technically classified as saltwater, so the wooden boats are registered with the Polish Register of Shipping as seagoing vessels. That's right, despite being over 700 feet underground and many miles from the nearest coastline, Polish law requires them to follow the same strict maritime safety regulations as ocean liners, complete with certified life jackets and official maritime inspections. And then we have that unusual slide, stretching 459 feet and featuring a steep incline that connects 2 levels of the mine. This wooden slide was initially inspired by the traditional chutes miners used to navigate between galleries quickly. Though, in modern times, visitors ride down on a protective pad and reach exhilarating speeds as they disappear into the dimly lit cavern. At the bottom of the slide is the sports field. At 820 feet underground, the chamber houses a regulation-sized basketball and volleyball court, flanked by a dining area and sleeping quarters. This might be sounding kind of strange to you. You're probably wondering, what is this all doing in an industrial mine? Well, the massive excavation was converted into a wellness area thanks to the chamber's unique microclimate, which is rich in sodium chloride and free of surface pollutants, transforming the space into an underground sanatorium. And here's another fun fact. For Polish school kids, my own daughters included, spending the night down here is a type of rite of passage. But I grew up in America, so I've yet to experience that for myself.
And that was Bochnia Salt Mine. Special thanks to my guides for hosting me today. It was an amazing adventure. And remember, this is one of the last episodes we're doing for On Location, but if you guys want to catch more similar content, check it out over on the new channel, What's Inside the Castle. Otherwise, until next time, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off. Not only did I lose my concept of space, but time. It's dark. I have no idea what time it is, actually. That was a fantastic adventure.
For me as well.
Yeah?
We are crazy. I
Yeah,
didn't even
no,
know that Michał is so crazy, so love it.
I knew when I saw you guys that I was in for a treat.